Welcome to your UCLA Alumni Association Town Hall. I am your UCLA Alumni Association President, D'Artagnan Scorza. So proud to be here with you as we begin to have, as we've had now a series of conversations focused on issues ranging from COVID to the campus's growth and development, to education, and to a whole host of areas that are of interest to our alumni community. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm excited about the opportunity to be in dialogue with you. But tonight we're going to start our conversation in a slightly different way. You know, up to this point, we've talked about a number of issues that are of importance to the alumni community. And tonight, we have an issue that we are going to discuss that is of importance to both our alumni board of directors, but also to our Bruins around the world. As many of you know, there was a recent heinous crime committed in Atlanta that took the lives of a number of Asian Americans in that community. Over the past year, there's been a significant rise in violent attacks against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and has led to more than 3,795 reported anti-Asian hate incidents in the past year. The shootings that took place in Atlanta this week were unconscionable. The entire UCLA alumni community denounces the senseless violence against the AAPI community and the tragic loss of life that took place as a result. You know, what's unfortunate is that these are not isolated incidents. The violence that occurred stems from a history of pervasive racism, misogyny, and xenophobia that has continuously dehumanized Asian American and Pacific Islanders. The recent surge in anti-Asian rhetoric throughout the COVID-19 pandemic has not only served to amplify incidents of hate and violence perpetuated against the AAPI community, but has also led to increased levels of rhetoric, both online and offline, against that same community. As leaders of the UCLA Alumni Association, we express our heartfelt condolences to all who have been affected by these acts of hate. We strongly condemn them. And we strongly condemn the hatred that has emerged. And we ask that as an alumni community, we all stand together to combat racism. Let's live out our true Bruin values by acknowledging, amplifying, and denouncing the ongoing anti-Asian hate crimes and sentiment experienced in many of our communities. Let's combat racism through care for one another, civic engagement, financial support, and leadership in our spheres of influence. In this critical moment, we call upon you, our alumni community, to take action by supporting the organized efforts of the Stop AAPI Hate Initiative, which is currently partnering with the UCLA Asian American Studies Center. We ask that you report incidents of hate, that you share safety tips, that you be informed, that you support local efforts and be civically engaged in your community so that we can protect each other and live out values of care and justice at large. We ask that you denounce anti-Asian racism and work towards racial justice, that you also consider donating to Asian American and Pacific Islander organizations such as Stop AAPI Hate and the Asian Americans Advancing Justice. Support Asian-owned businesses and support ethnic studies programs that help to teach us how to appreciate living in a diverse society. We also recognize that resilience and connection to our community, our beloved community, will allow us to strengthen each other, to deal with issues related to trauma, and to eventually heal. If needed, we encourage you to seek professional support to cope with and facilitate healing during these difficult times. And we would like to share resources below that may be helpful in processing your experiences. And so if you visit our website, you'll see this audience. If you visit our website, you'll see the statement posted, as well as resources that are made available. I want you to know that hate against any one of us is a threat and harm to all of us. And as always, we will continue to support our Bruins, and thank you for standing in solidarity with our Asian American and Pacific Islander community. And I will tell you on a personal level that as a United States Navy veteran, someone who served my country, I believe that it is important for us to fight for what's right, to fight for freedom. Right? There are many of us who are veterans that have put our lives on the line to ensure that this is a free country to live in, that this is a place where all people are valued, where we lift up diversity, where we honor and acknowledge the humanity in our fellow Americans. It is important for each and every single one of us to continue to support each other, to come together in unity, and to stand against any violence that's perpetuated against any one of our fellow Americans in our communities. I want to thank you all so much for listening tonight. And I've invited our one of our fellow board members, Ed Liu, to join us tonight in this conversation as well. Ed, welcome to our town hall. And I'd like to also invite Patricia Nguyen, one of our staff members, to join us in this conversation. Ed and Patricia are going to be with us tonight. Ed and Patricia, welcome to tonight's town hall.
Hi, Dart. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Patricia and Ed, for joining us. We really appreciate you being available and being willing to have this conversation with us tonight. Thank you so much for your leadership. Now, we know that you helped craft this conversation, or at least helped us craft this statement, and really began to sort of lay out this understanding for folk in our alumni community. I want to thank you for your leadership here tonight. Folk, I also want to remind you that Professor Adriana Galva will be joining us very shortly. She had a brief sort of issue that came up, and she'll be joining us. So please stay tuned. Our special guest will be with us tonight. Now, Ed and Patricia, you know, what just share with us, what are you seeing happen in your communities today? How are folk reacting? What are people beginning to deal with? Patricia, let's start with you.
You know, the Asian American Pacific Islander community is a rather diverse one. And so I know there are many pockets of us that are coping and dealing and processing this current moment in so many different ways. Some are coming in a space of fear to go outside, fear to engage. Others are responding with a lot of anger, not only for the experience that we're facing as a community, but the larger societal issues around racial injustice. And there's a deep amount of sadness and grief because there are lives lost. Personally, I will say for myself, I am angry, I'm sad, I'm fearful. I'm fearful for myself, I'm fearful for my family members. Especially my Asian elders who may have a hard time navigating due to language barriers or not always expecting something like this to happen. But I know the community is also strong and resilient, and they're mobilizing. And so that is something that I'd love to talk more about, but I'd love to hear from Ed in terms of what he's also experiencing in his circles.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. I think this has really been something that's been building up. I mean, certainly incidents of hate are not new. But over the last year, we have seen a dramatic rise in incidents. And I think at first people were discounting them to like verbal harassment. But more recently, we've seen that it's become very, very violent, not only verbally, but physically as well. And it's getting closer to home for a lot of people. And I think now we're at a point where no one can really avoid it anymore. You know, initially we were seeing incidents that were happening in the Bay Area, and I think people were willing to say, well, that's just the Bay Area. It's going to go away. It's going to stop. And I think everybody was hoping that when 2021 came around, that things really would get better. But we've actually seen them go the other direction where they're escalating. And this culminated with the events that just happened a few days ago. And it's difficult. It's difficult for the community right now. I see it daily in the faces of people that I am able to see virtually, that it's really affecting them and impacting them. And it our effort that Patricia and I and everybody that was involved with working on the statement that you recited so eloquently, Dart, was really, you know, our attempt to try to provide some healing and support for our alumni community, and also put forth a path on what we can do, what allies can do to try to help our AAPI community during this time.
Thank you so much for that, Ed and Patricia. I really appreciate you just being willing to share. You know, in moments like this, you know, it's obviously really important that we acknowledge the challenges that folk in our alumni community and more broadly, many of our families and our elders are experiencing. So, you know, given what you just said, Ed, about this sort of being something that's been building over time, can you talk to us a bit about what you see as being some of the root causes, right? What actually, where do you think this is coming from, right? I know there's a history here, even in Los Angeles, that where Asian Americans have faced issues of violence in the past. Where do you think this is coming from in present day?
That's a great question. I wish I had a very clear answer to that. I mean, I think you hit on it, Dart, in that it's really been a history of xenophobia. It started as early as the at 1800s with the first waves of immigrants from China and the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act, the sentiments that led to that. In the 1900s, um, we saw incidents of hate and xenophobia against our Japanese American community and the ability to own land and to be incarcerated during World War II. And even in the 1980s, when we had the murder of Vincent Chin, who was a Chinese American auto worker in Detroit, that was blamed, um, identified as a Japanese American person and blamed for someone who was taking away jobs from other people. It's really hard to say what feeds into that, but I think a lot of those sentiments still continue today. And we could probably talk about what recent incidents might have been to trigger that, but I think it's just been this kind of this underlying sentiment that is now surfacing. And I think one of the things that we can hopefully benefit by having it surface now is that we can really address it more directly, more head on. And that's what I'm hoping that comes out of this experience.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you reciting history. And Patricia, I'm going to come to you here in just a second. But folk, I don't know if you know, even here in LA County in 1863, in the California, in 1863, our state legislature passed a law that Asians who at the time were defined as Chinese, Mongolian, Indian, etc., could not testify in court against white Americans. And it actually made them vulnerable to abuse and injustice. And in fact, in 1871, there was a mob of approximately 500 white persons who entered Chinatown, attacked, robbed, and murdered Chinese residents. And so, that massacre took place here on Calle de los Negros, which at the time was called Street of the Negroes, which is present-day Los Angeles Street, where El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument and Union Station stands. So, we're not even absolved of these challenges here ourselves in Los Angeles County, but there's when we say there's a long-standing history of racism, even some of our laws and our policies have created the conditions that many of our Chinese and Asian Indo-Pacific Islander and even Indian and African American families and Latino American families have faced. Patricia, can you speak to some of the root causes of this challenge?
I think the United States has formalized sort of racial tensions in ways that always are in fear of like folks taking jobs. But I will say this, like xenophobia is intrinsic to some of the anti-Asian hate, right? So a lot of the current kind of issues around misunderstandings or stereotypes around where COVID is coming from, the misinformation around that is just like fueling this in more ways than one. And this is not a new strategy. It's been done in the past as well. When you talked about that massacre, I actually do want to lift up the names. 10% of the Asian community at that time was decimated in that massacre. There was a mob of 500 white folks that came through, but a lot of it was fear of like losing jobs or xenophobia. So, like this whole thing of understanding the totality of how all this stuff is interconnected needs to be on the shoulders of all of us to understand. Because I will say also within the Asian community, trying to process all this is also super difficult. I will just share my personal experiences. I know there are some families where language barriers exist because of immigration patterns, right? First gen, second gen Asian Americans are having a hard time processing this. With my grandmother, I have a hard time fully expressing myself in regards of what all this means and how to explain it to her, because they thought bringing me here would be a place of opportunity and I would be safe. And now they're feeling that these moments are just a shot in their own hearts around what they had hoped for all of us. That intergenerational trauma is felt, but really hard to talk about. Help-seeking behavior and mental health issues within the AAPI community are intrinsically tied to racism. And so, I understand the totality of there's been structural and historical issues, but they're lending themselves to societal and cultural barriers and issues that won't allow us to heal properly or address the things that are happening to us right now. I also feel like the monolith of the Asian American stereotypes around the model minority and homogenize us all to one population also creates these tensions. You know, our immigration patterns and our histories of each of the different ethnicities of Asian Americans are uniquely different, but we are homogenized into one whole. And so, you know, very few know that, you know, Vietnamese Americans are actually very close to the poverty line. Of course, we have media that we are celebrating in terms of things like Crazy Rich Asians or House of Ho or Bling Empire, but that's only one part of our community. And so those are things I hope, you know, all of us as Bruins, given our dedication to lifelong learning, we will continue to educate ourselves and inform ourselves in the diverse and unique experiences of our various different counterparts of our Asian American and Pacific Islander community. So it's a complicated answer, but for me, I believe in higher education, and us as alumni are equipped with ways from our education, but our Bruin spirit to continually interrogate and investigate and address these issues.
Thank you for that, Patricia. Thank you, Ed. So, you know, I want to acknowledge, right, that that not everyone's going to sort of see things the same way, right? We all sort of come to the table with a diverse set of experiences. And I recognize that some folk may not see this as being an issue of sort of race, or they may just see it as an issue of violence, right? It's a tragic loss of life. And so we, you know, and recognizing that and understanding that, you know, what can we say to folks if we want to bring them into this conversation, right? If we wanted to help build some empathy around what's actually happening at this time. And then we're going to shift shortly after that question to talk about sort of what we're doing as an alumni association. But so tell me, you know, folk might be saying right now, hey, why are you even talking about this, right? This is not an important topic to talk about, or, you know, you're supposed to be representing all alumni, right? All alumni don't see this way. So how could we respond to folk in our community, right? To bring people into an understanding of what actually might be happening to other members in our community.
I think education and awareness. I think it's important for people to know that regardless of where these events are happening, it affects them somehow. I think just by, you know, the way that you physically look makes you a potential victim in cases like this, a potential target. So I think letting people know about, you know, what to look out for, how to report incidents of hate. There's a lot of different websites that have been launched now, and you know, we're supportive of the Stop API Hate campaign. So we would encourage people to report any kinds of incidents like that. I think for people who are allies of the API community, also make sure that they just have a good understanding of history, and can understand, you know, some of the differences in the API community, that we aren't a monolith, like Patricia said, what some of the differences are, that there's a myth of a model minority that is very prevalent out there and contributes to a lot of these sentiments. I think education, as a educational institution, I think that's something that UCLA is uniquely equipped to do. And you know, with the support of the Alumni Association as well, that's something that we can continue to spread to people even after they graduate from the halls of the university.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Patricia, what are your thoughts?
You know, I'm going to take this in a couple of steps. You know, I know everyone has a different capacity to understand and feel and do. You know, when it comes to allies, I know we're very action oriented. So I'll just say what I've been saying to my friends that have been reaching out that don't identify as Asian. You know, just the concept of showing up and checking in is quite useful. You know, offering and creating space. You know, even when Ed and I were up late night trying to write these statements, for people just to ask, how can we help? What can we do? Asking community members that you know, or family and friends that you know. I had folks even ask, you know, like I know you're down in a different area. I'm in the Bay. Do you have family up here? Do you need someone to accompany, you know, your family and friends up here? So there's interpersonal ways that we can support each other. In a different way, civic engagement is also important, you know, so what Ed spoke about in terms of getting involved locally and statewide and nationally, Stop API Hate has great resources on how to get involved. You can call your elected officials to talk about certain things. There are scripts that are there. So I encourage you all to get civically engaged. As Bruins, I hope you all, you know, get to know our various community members, our Asian Pacific alumni of UCLA, as well as our Filipino Alumni Association, do our social justice forward. So I encourage you, You know, one of the things I have always heard from Patrice scholars is join an organization. And you have organizations within our Alumni Association that are working on these issues. So if you are interested.
No, tell us a bit more about that. This is going to be, I want to thank our guests for joining us tonight. But I want us to be able to wrap on what people can actually do, right? So I know you're getting ready to go down that track. And so Ed and Patricia, just briefly tell us about what the Alumni Association, what our networks are doing, and perhaps even what the campus is doing. And don't forget to talk to folk about our Changemaker Summit. Ed and Patricia.
Yeah, Ed, I'll whittle some off and then you can tell me if I'm forgetting any. So coming up actually this Friday, for those that identify as Asian American and Pacific Islander or allies, we'll be holding a space called a dial-in check-in. We create this in response to the various societal issues that have been going on, and we're creating alumni-specific spaces for those to come and process. That's this Friday at 5:30 if you want to join us. I do encourage you all to think about the statement that D'Artagnan wrote, eloquently recited earlier. If you can post and share, because one of the issues we are facing as an API community is awareness around these issues. So if entities like the UCLA Alumni Association uplift these things, I hope you all can too. Think about your social media platforms there. I do also want to point your attention to the Stop API Hate initiative. It is a coalition of 3 organizations. I will say I'm very prideful that our UCLA Asian American Study Center is highly involved in this effort. Please visit their website, which we can include in the post-show, because they are doing a lot of research there. I also want to lift the American Indian Study Center. They are creating a hate crime map for those that don't feel comfortable in reporting crimes with your full name. You can also report incidents, and our American Indian Study Center is collecting that in their hate crime map. In addition to that, we do have organizations like Asian Pacific Alumni of UCLA, as well as our Filipino alumni. They are always open to new members and those that have concerted efforts, as well as our diversity programs and initiatives team. Feel free to email at any time if you have an idea and want to get involved and want to mobilize alumni. There's always a will and a way here at the Alumni Association.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Ed?
I think Patricia covered a lot of it. I mean, I would just add to that, just continue to be civically engaged. Pay attention to what your lawmakers are doing. Think about running for public office. Think about getting involved in volunteerism and other kinds of civic engagement. And of course, vote. Voting's so important all the time. And be a very informed and educated voter as well.
Well, so I want to thank you both, Ed and Patricia, for taking some time to join us on tonight's town hall, for not only sharing your stories and uplifting this moment, but ensuring that we're all made more aware of the circumstances and the situations that are going on in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. We want to, recognize that as an alumni association, as leaders in the alumni community, we stand in solidarity with our Asian American alums and community. I want to call upon each of you to continue to support our Asian American Pacific Islander neighbors, friends, family, siblings, elders, because again, hate and or a threat to any one of us is a threat to all of us, right? So we got to make sure that we do our part to make this society, to make our communities better, safer, stronger, to honor the diversity that exists in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And so I want to thank you both so much for joining us tonight and wish you a great Thursday. You are welcome to stay on, by the way, as we begin to have a great conversation with our guest tonight, Dean Adriana Galva. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for making space.
Of course, you got it. So, folks, thank you again for staying with us tonight. We want to appreciate you for tuning in. Again, I am your UCLA Alumni Association President, D'Artagnan Scorza, and I'm joined by such an amazing guest tonight, Dean Adriana Galva. Dean Galva is a professor of psychology at UCLA, whose expertise is in adolescent brain development. She received her BA from Barnard College, Columbia University, and her Ph.D. In neuroscience from Cornell. She's the director of Developmental Neuroscience of the Developmental Neuroscience Laboratory, and she focuses on characterizing neuromechanisms underlying adolescent behavior with an eye towards informing policy, especially in the areas of juvenile justice. Her research is funded by the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Russell Sage Foundation, and many others. She utilizes a multimodal approach that combines both brain imaging, task-based behavior, and physiological assays to ask the following questions. How do neurodevelopmental challenges in cortical and striatal systems observe characteristic adolescent behaviors, including decision making? Basically, how does your brain, your chemistry affect the way you think, even if you're a teenager or an adolescent? We have a brief video we're going to share with you tonight, which demonstrates Dean Galvan's research, as well as some of the ways in which she's pioneering scientific methods today. Here, take a look.
Great question. How does the teenage brain make decisions? One of the first discoveries relevant to this topic was made when we discovered that the part of your brain in the very front called the prefrontal cortex, which is the last brain region to develop because your brain develops from the back to the front, continues to change up until the mid-20s. And the reason this is relevant is because the prefrontal cortex is a part of your brain that helps you think about the consequences or potential consequences of your actions before you do them. It helps you regulate your behavior and your emotions. And so it makes sense that if this part of the brain isn't fully available until well past adolescence, then teenagers may make more impulsive decisions.
So thank you so much for that. And so that's right. If your brain is not well developed, teenagers are going to make more impulsive decisions. Is that right, Dean Galvin?
That's right. Why did you make me sit through that? You didn't tell me we were going to do that.
We have to show a video of your brilliance these days. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, and also acknowledge that Adriana Galva is the UCLA Dean of Undergraduate Education as well, and she serves and supports all undergraduate areas across the college and professional schools. So Dean Galvin, what did it feel like just watching yourself on the screen there?
I don't like watching it, but I still stand by that. We did that, I think almost 9 years ago was that talk. But as you mentioned, it's so nice to see you again, dear Jane. I study the adolescent brain and think about how the changes that happen to everybody, every single person on this planet undergoes puberty, and what those changes mean for how we express ourselves, how we respond to the environment, the choices that we make. And I think adolescence is a really fascinating time in life. So I'm very happy to be the Dean of Undergraduate Education, where I get to work with young people every day.
That's really phenomenal. And for the benefit of those who are in the audience with us today, you've been in your role for 8 months, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Do you love it? I mean, what do you think? I mean, how are you feeling?
I absolutely love it. My colleagues thought I was insane to take on this job during the pandemic when there's so much decision making to go on that doesn't typically happen. But it's been really fun. I'm lucky to work with such fantastic colleagues across campus, and colleagues in student affairs and in other divisions. And together we're working hard to figure out how we move forward during this crazy time.
Yeah. So what are your key takeaways? I mean, what do you say? One of the things that we've done in launching this town hall is we've said to our alumni community, hey, there's so much that has to take place during this pandemic, during COVID. So what are some of the things that you've learned in this past year?
Number one is that people care about connection. And that is before a pandemic, during a pandemic, and maybe especially during a pandemic, that our students really want to feel connected. And so we worked really hard to find ways for them to do that. Of course, doing so in a remote environment is not the same. It's not the way that our brains are meant to work. It's not the way that we socialize with one another. But I think we've made it work. And now that we see a light at the end of the tunnel, it's that much easier to swallow, right? To be able to know that we won't be in this space forever. So we're really looking forward to the fall when hopefully the majority of our classes are in person.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think connection is so important. I think obviously that's what a lot of our students are talking about right now, right? They want to be together. As a faculty member currently who teaches in the School of Public Health, I can tell you a lot of my students are adolescents, and they're often saying, God, I wish I could experience this final year with the fullness of what it means to be in college. And so how are you responding to that and reacting to the needs of students on the campus?
Yeah. So, we sent a lot of guidance for instructors and faculty and how they can make this happen in the virtual space, whether that's breakout rooms or finding times for students to connect kind of less formally, because a lot of students told us that what they missed are those informal interactions before or after class, and how can we simulate or make that experience happen in the virtual space. And some of our, a lot of our faculty have found ways to do that. So that's wonderful.
Fantastic. So given that you are a professor and researcher focused on adolescent brain development, how does that influence the way in which you approach your work now with the dean, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, does that change how does that influence your perspective?
Yeah. It's so funny. When I became a scientist who studies the adolescent brain, I didn't, of course, imagine that I would use that knowledge and that those years of research to think about questions for college students. But the way it does is that a lot of my research is actually on why adolescents make risky decisions, and why is there an increase in risky decision making as you hit puberty and then through your mid-20s. And what I've come to learn is that helps our species grow and explore and kind of leave the nest, if you will, in ways that are really important. And so how that translates into my work as the dean is that it's important to encourage risk taking in a healthy way. Of course, I'm not talking about the crazy parties and things like that. But what I'm saying is that people of this age need to be encouraged and feel safe in exploring new majors or new ideas that maybe they hadn't thought about before. As a psychology professor, I get a lot of students in my office who want to go to med school, and that's fantastic. Med school is a wonderful aspiration. But if you don't want to go to med school, there are other things, so many other things on this campus you can take advantage of. And so during my time as dean, I really want to encourage students to explore those other options and to learn inside the classroom, but also outside of the classroom through other means.
So it's interesting you say that. I hadn't even thought about it that way, right? That risk taking is a way to sort of individuate, right? So
Yes.
autonomy as you begin to separate from your caretakers. I think that's what Erickson would talk about, right? Eric Erickson, in terms of one's psychological development and the stages we go through. So I guess you just also said you're not talking about the crazy parties. Now, look, I think every last single one of us that have been on here have probably been to at least one of those crazy parties.
Yeah, maybe one or two.
I was gonna say that's not allowed. Come on, like if you're gonna, no. So understanding that, I think it's really important for folks to recognize sort of the role that children, or rather the multiple roles that they're going to play in their own lives, right? But even their growth and development. So let's say you're a grandparent, right, and you're watching your adolescent grandchild grow up during this time of isolation. How can you help them, especially if they're trying to individuate and their brain is going, I just want to get out of here.
Yeah. It's such an important question. I think one way is to make it okay to make mistakes, right? I think that learning through trial and error is actually the number one way we learn. When we're little and learning to walk, you can only learn through trial and error. No one can sit you down and tell you this is how you walk or this is how you talk. You learn by trying things. And that persists throughout life, and including during adolescence. Of course, it's harder to see that and appreciate that and encourage that because we're so concerned about our young people making choices that are irreparable. But most of the time, the types of decisions that they're doing and new activities that they're engaging in are serving as learning opportunities. So I think if you're a grandparent or you're a parent, I think remembering how we learned, and certainly some of those crazy parties contributed to who we are today, right? And so I think that's something to celebrate.
I would tell you, as a father of a son who just turned 12, I am not looking forward to his individuation. Okay?
I'm the same. I have a son who's 10, and I feel the same way. I see the beginning of what I know is to come. Scary.
He's getting deeper. He's looking at me different. It's a whole. So let me ask you, as a faculty member working with other faculty members, right, as the dean, obviously faculty have to learn about these things. So how are you helping university faculty understand how to improve their teaching practices or their sort of research practices, given what we know about brain science?
Yeah. One thing we've learned is that we know for sure not everybody learns the same way. And so encouraging faculty and giving them the space and the time that they need to think about their curriculum and how they engage students, I think is really important, because all of us, if we've learned anything from the pandemic, is that pre-pandemic we were just go, and some of us have had to take a step back and rethink how we do things, and including faculty. So I think it's given them an opportunity to restructure the way they deliver information.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So here's a question that's coming from our audience, and everyone wants to know about screen time and social media, right? I know that social media has actually helped with sort of identity development for some of our young folks, especially when they move from home and move onto a campus. It's actually been really helpful to some extent. But now, you know, folk are Netflixing and chilling, right? They're binging out. They're spending a lot of time in front of the screen. I mean, during this pandemic, we're all like super Zoom, right? We now know about Zoom fatigue and all these things. But really, the question from the audience is, you know, does it ruin the brain? Like, tell us what's going on with kids' brain in young folks' brain when they're sitting in front of the television in front of the screen, you know, all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I get this question a lot, and a lot of my neuroscientist colleagues and I think about this. And the truth is, we don't know the answer to that because the internet and the screen time and the social media hasn't been around long enough for us to see cohort effects. You know, people in the 70s and 80s and 90s, we didn't have that experience, so it's hard to compare. But what we do know is that initial reports of there being a relationship between screen time and mental health, those relationships aren't that strong. It's not the case that screen time causes mental health problems or things like that. But what's important to consider is what's being given up or neglected at the expense of screen time, including sleep, including interactions face to face. And those are the things we should focus on, making sure that those things are still attended to, that kids are not sleeping with their phones on their pillow, which disrupts their sleep because every time they get pinged, they look at their phone. Anyway, so that in those indirect ways, screen time may be more detrimental than.
Let me ask you. So I know our young folk when they get pinged, they're like this. But look, I have an Apple Watch, right?
Yeah.
You have one. How does that affect us as adults? I mean, well, so you have what is it? The Samsung version? Is that right?
This one, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't know. I got it for Christmas.
So that's the point, right? We're all like living with our phones. We're living in this world. How does that affect the rest of us? I mean, as a neuroscientist, right?
Yeah.
How's technology affecting us as well? How's it rewiring our brains?
Yeah. Well, we don't know, but we know that people think that they're better at multitasking than they are, right? And so that's been proven even before screens. And I think that's giving us that illusion that we can do more things than we can, right? I mean, you see people texting and driving, you see people doing all things that they think they can do at the same time and they can't. So it's really challenging our impressions of ourselves.
So what it's doing is it's creating a lot of distractions.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well said. Yeah.
That's interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. Well, so I think one of the questions people have, raised in our chat here from the audience is around sort of university and even student life. Now, we know that a lot of our students want to return to the campus. So when do you project that might happen? I think the chancellor is sending out notices, but when might you think that would be possible? And when they do return, you know, what does that mean for them as adolescents?
Yeah. We're super excited for them to return. So we are actually just mapping out, we've been thinking about it for many, many weeks. But now that we got the directive from the UC President Drake, that he hopes and intends for the majority of schools to be open across the UC, that is certainly true at UCLA. And we have been busy figuring out exactly how many students we can have in a classroom that's still at a safe distance, how many minutes do we need between classes in order to clean the classrooms and things like that. And the challenge is that where we are now is hopefully not where we will be in September. And so planning for the unknown is tricky. But what we do know is that we intend for the majority of classes or the majority of in-person to happen in the fall.
That's interesting because I think one of the questions folk have right now is about the way in which sort of, classes might emerge. So do you think there's going to be is there a likelihood there's going to be a hybrid model? Or maybe people will come back in full forward.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you all are dealing with right now?
Yeah. So what we're planning is that very large lecture courses will be delivered remotely. And that's simply because of what I just mentioned about the capacity in classrooms and the safety and things like that. And then the smaller classes and classes that, UCLA smaller is not necessarily, 5 or 10 students, but more like 50 or 60 students. Those are going to be delivered in person. And this will give students a mix of remote and in person. So in that sense, they're hybrid. What we're trying to avoid is having classes whereby one course is delivered both in person and hybrid, because that just leads to a lot of disruption for students.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
So, we've been navigating the pandemic, and at the top of the town hall, we talked a bit about racial injustice. There's also been issues related to social inequality, and these have come to the forefront of conversations in our country. So, how are you, as the dean, helping to address these in the undergraduate experience?
Mhm. I think it's super important to listen to student voice, and certainly my predecessor did that well, and colleagues across campus. That as students are increasingly vocal about these issues, I think it's super important to keep them involved in the conversation. So, for example, the university is moving towards becoming a Hispanic serving institution. And that will involve not just the administration and faculty, but students as well, to ensure that we can uh, acknowledge and represent all of our students.
Thank you so much for that. So, a lot of folk are asking about commencement, right? Like, okay, we're going to get the vaccine. The vaccine's coming. President Biden has promised that it's going to be made available by May 1st. Commencement. What's the thinking there?
Yeah, I get so many emails from, I will say, very patient parents, because I know families want to know. This is top of mind, and it certainly is top of mind for us. A few weeks ago, we thought we were ready to make an announcement, but then there have been changes, a lot of changes in LA, and so we really want to ensure that we explore every single option to honor our students. We know that, especially students, all students, but students who are in their last year at UCLA, the last thing they want to do, we know, is not feel like they feel connected to the university at the end. So we will be making an announcement in the next few weeks, and we really appreciate the patience, because we know it's tricky, it's challenging to wait.
I appreciate that. And I do want to thank folks for their patience, right? I mean, although our crosstown rival announced that
Yes,
they're having commencements, right, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to drive what we do at this university, right?
that's right.
We're focused on not only maintaining safety, but also maintaining the well-being and the health of our
Yeah,
communities. So even if you are vaccinated, or some of you are getting vaccinated, which I really hope you explore for yourself and your family, just note that you still got to take precautions. We still got to make sure people are going to be safe and be healthy, and we do everything we can to not create these events, especially since there's now this new California strain, right? They're
I
talking
know.
California
Exactly.
strain that's emerged, right?
I'm
So
so happy you brought that up. Exactly. So it really is about safety and also equity, because as I don't know if you read the fine print, but in California, even though we've moved into a different tier, in-person events can only be accommodated for California residents. And so that, of course, would exclude a certain number of graduates. And so we're really thinking carefully about how we can ensure that we're equitable and safe, and of course, manage the logistical considerations as well.
that's right. Folks, I want to definitely thank you for joining us tonight, and just make a quick announcement that our next town hall is on April 29th at 5 p.m. with our Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Anna Sprain Bradley. Anna Sprain Bradley will be joining us on April 29th at 5 p.m. So make sure you join us. Now, Dean Galvan, before we leave, a lot of folk are wondering, like, what do you see? Do you see these changes, right? What do you think is going to happen in terms of long-term adolescent development? Do you think COVID has, people talk about a lost year in education. They're talking about some of the trauma that families have experienced.
Yeah.
My daughter is running around here in the morning like, okay, I'm done with school. Get me off the Zoom, right? So,
Yeah.
what do you think is going to happen to brains now?
Yeah. Such an important question, and so many initiatives quickly, scientists mobilize quickly to study this population, and we don't know, and we know that unfortunately the pandemic and the consequences of it will disproportionately affect certain communities in different ways. And so I think that's something that we need to be on the lookout for. But luckily, educators and mental health professionals are recognizing the need to support in this way.
Fantastic. So, I really appreciate you sharing that. And folks, thank you so much for your questions that are coming in. I think in many ways, we have some opportunities to look at these emerging things and think about them, and think about, some of these challenges. So in that regard, what do you think students may be facing right now? Like, in the field, what are you seeing as some of the emerging issues and things and their challenges adolescents are dealing with?
The data, there's been a lot of focus on mental health and how that has changed during the pandemic. And there have been some really surprising data. Of course, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so the results aren't conclusive, but there's been an uptick in emergency room visits among adolescents and young people. There's an uptick in depression and suicidal ideation. But what's interesting is that there's been some reports suggest that there's a decrease in anxiety, and that's a really interesting trend, because up until the pandemic, rates of anxiety were increasing among adolescents and young adults. And so it's unclear why that is. It might be that young people who feel anxious or anxious about things in their school or work, by staying home, didn't face those things daily, right? So that reduces anxiety. But certainly there's also the consideration that as we return to in-person activities, there may be another uptick in anxiety, just reacclimating to society. So we'll see what happens. But at UCLA, we're certainly planning for extra support, and I know our student affairs colleagues are doing an excellent job at preparing for that.
We really want to thank you for your leadership there as well, and just both recognizing that, but also we'd love to stay sort of informed so we can let our alumni community understand how they can best support the adolescents in their own lives.
Yeah.
Here's our final question for you tonight.
Okay.
As an alumni association, right, we're 500,000 strong. We're out there in the community working to serve as both the voice, but also to bring resources back to our campus and back to our Bruin family. How would you like to see UCLA's alum get more involved in or contribute to the undergraduate experience?
That's a fantastic question. I think that it comes back to something that you asked me earlier about what we want our undergraduates to do, right? How does my work as a adolescent brain scientist inform my time as dean? And I think one thing is that we need to provide our students with a broad way of experiences, whether those are internships or support for experiential learning, and encouraging ways for our students to think about their future outside of the classroom. And in particular, for those students who may not have the opportunity to do so because they're helping their family, they're working, and they don't have the time to, or the resources to engage and learn in that way. So I think that's really one of the most important things, is to support all of our students in not just, I'm not just saying, things in terms of scholarships or something like that, but providing opportunities for them to work outside of that space.
Fantastic. So the potential, that's great. So potential job opportunities, internships, careers. I think I'm not sure if you saw, but we recently launched the Bruin Promise, which is our alumni affairs and external affairs and alumni association's commitment to providing support for our Bruins throughout their lifespan. So if you're looking to provide support or even be supported, just know that you can come to your UCLA Alumni Association to be there for you and to walk alongside you throughout your entire lifespan, because we're committed to not only lifelong learning, but providing the resources and tools that you need to be successful. Dean Galva, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We understand how busy you are, and thank you for making time and pushing through to join us as well. It's been such a pleasure to have you. And I want to thank our special guests, Ed, Lou, and Patricia Nguyen, for joining us tonight. I want to thank them for lifting up the moment that we're in and acknowledge that we all are here to stand in solidarity with each other. Dean Galvan, do you have any final words or thoughts or comments to our alumni community?
No, just thank you. Always happy to chat with you.
It's such a pleasure to see you again. Want to wish you all the best during this pandemic, and just know that on behalf of our Alumni Association, we're here to support you and to support our many undergraduate students and graduate students, for that matter, during this time. Folks, I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. Welcome you back to join me on the next town hall, which will take place on April 29th at 5 p.m. with Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Anna Spain Bradley. Again, thank you for joining us. Go Bruins.
Bye.